I'll call the meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Town of Norton Zoning Board of Appeals. It is Wednesday, July 22. We are operating remotely pursuant to the executive order of Governor Baker of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the orders of the Board of Select Persons for the Town of Norton, instituted in March and April. The meeting is being held remotely with all available attention to video and audio connections as posted on the agenda. I will ask that, and I think I see most microphones are muted. I'll ask that you mute your own microphones, or that Mr. DiGiuseppe, as our planning director, do so if we have extraneous audio coming in. It's been a problem in the past, as you might understand, with people not intending to get their audio on, but the audio coming through anyway. At this point, for the record, I think I'll take attendance. Mr. Tenori, you're here?
I am.
Mr. Bowie, are you here?
I am here, sir.
Mr. Wren?
I am here.
And I am Tom Noel, here as well, present as well as chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals. We have 3 items on the agenda tonight. The first 2 are going to be fairly quick. The first one, I think, will be the quickest. First item on the agenda is a application, actually an appeal filed by Norton Mobile Home Park, 157 Mansfield Ave. The applicant seeks an appeal of building inspector's decision regarding the replacement of 2 mobile homes in that park. And the revised agenda notes that the applicant sought a continuance to August 19, 2020, which is our next, it's actually not our next scheduled meeting, but is our August scheduled meeting. Is that correct, Paul?
Yes.
Anything further to add on the continuance? It was a matter of, I think, council not being able to make it tonight.
Council changed. Another attorney from that firm is taking over that case, and he needed time to get familiar with it.
Okay.
So, yes.
The application is in the file, and members you may have reviewed already. Can I have a motion to continue the application, actually the appeal of the Norton Mobile Home Park, to our meeting of August 19, 2020 at, say, 7 p.m.
I'll make the motion to move the meeting of the municipal meeting to August 19th at 7 p.m.
And I'll second that. This is Jim Tiller.
Okay, thank you. Without further discussion, I'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Wren, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Tenori, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you, and I vote in favor of the continuance as well. Matters continue to August 19 at 7 p.m. The second item on the agenda is a continued application concerning 15 Hawthorne Road. The applicants are Brian and Sue Redman. This has been continued from previous meetings. First, is there a motion to take this application up for discussion this evening?
I'll make a motion to the discussion of the 15 Hawthorne Road to discussion.
I'll second.
All right, thank you. Without further discussion, roll call vote, please. Mr. Wren, for further discussion tonight, how do you vote?
In favor?
Mr. Tenori, how do you vote?
In favor as well.
I am as well in favor of taking this up from the table for further discussion. With Mr. DiGiuseppe's help, there's been communications with the applicant through email, I believe only email, And the applicant has stated that he does not want to appear remotely, telephonically or by video. An email that it was received yesterday, July 21 at 2:17 p.m. From Mr. Redmond states, I just received the email this morning as I was away from the computer. I do not wish to be heard on the upcoming Board of Appeals meetings on 7/22, 7/29, or 8/19. Not only will I be unable to attend these meetings online, I would not want to if I was able to. I do not consent to the vote for my continuance while I am absent, as I have the right to be in attendance, which is impossible for me virtually. And so I would ask that this vote be postponed until I can attend an in-person meeting. There is more to this email. It is a matter of record. However, I will say that we, through Paul, tried to ask for a specific extension of time in which to consider this variance application. Mr. Redmond replied with the email, part of which I just read. My concern is that it's not an explicit extension of any deadlines. However, Town Council Amy Questle is with us, and I would ask her to advise us at this point as to the board's options. I'm aware generally that the emergency orders state that we can consider something remotely, even if the applicant does not consent to that. However, I'll say, in asking for Amy's opinion, that we may wish to clarify that we will be doing so at an upcoming meeting. And before we do so, but Amy, could you come into the conversation?
Sure. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amy Questle, Town Council. So, as you know, this is the this variance application is the result of a cease and desist from the building commissioner, and so therefore, the applicant, by filing a variance application and not filing an appeal of the building commissioner's cease and desist, he has lost his appeal. The appeal period is gone for filing. The 30 days is gone under Section 8 and 15 of Chapter 40A. So he can no longer file an appeal of the cease and desist. So essentially all he has right now is this variance application to allow for this garage to remain. This is the way that the Municipal Relief Act is written, is that it's exactly as it's titled. It's the Municipal Relief Act. So it allows the board to continue hearings if there are hearings that are far too complex for Zoom or for any virtual platform. For any reason, you can continue hearings up until 45 days after the termination of the state of emergency. The state of emergency is still in effect. And so therefore you have a couple options. Your options are to, this is a posted item on the agenda tonight. He is requesting a continuance. You do not have to grant the continuance, as you know, just as pre-COVID times, you don't have to accept the request to continue. A request to continue, this long is a bit unusual, I will say. It kind of seems like it might be a bit of an end run around the cease and desist order. I'm not sure, but it's something to consider, the fact that he's asked for an extension for so long. So you have a couple options. You can grant the extension, but again, since it's not a clear extension of the meeting date and the time to act, I would suggest that it be continued to the next meeting. And if you want to continue it further from there, you can. Or you can continue it to the next meeting and let the applicant know that you will be hearing them at the next meeting. Or you cannot continue the application, and you can make a decision based on the information that you have in front of you.
Okay, thank you.
One thing I just wanted to point out, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, for interrupting.
Oh, go ahead.
Is the fact that once this is denied, if this is decided on and denied, then 40A Section 16 would kick in, which means that the applicant cannot come back for 2 years unless whatever he's coming back for is substantially different and materially different.
Thank you. To Paul's credit and Nicole's, they were fairly explicit in saying that this was on for decision tonight. And it's a little frustrating to get this email in return. However, there's some more to the email, and I don't want to read every word, but the applicant does state, in regard to materials we had requested, and we requested these at our last non-COVID meeting back in February. As to materials you requested, I am meeting with my counsel next week. Again, that would imply next week. To go over these materials, I will be unable to provide them until they have been vetted and confirmed. With that in mind, that he's consulted counsel, he currently has some more materials. We had asked him, for the record, to supply whatever permits he had. He made the statement that he has everything going back over the years from the town. The town doesn't have certain permits or decisions from past years, and the applicant implied that, well, the town should because everything was properly permitted. For that reason, if no other, given that he is stating that he's meeting with counsel, his own counsel, this coming week, I would suggest that we extend to August 22 with a clear communication, perhaps from the chair. I'll leave that to discussion with counsel, stating that under the Relief Act, we have the right to carry forward this hearing and make a decision with or without the applicant's attendance, and that we expect to receive the materials and to move forward on the 22nd with the hearing on the merits. Reminding the board that this concerns a metal garage that was placed something like 1.5 feet from the side property line, contrary to the permit that Mr. Carmichael, the building inspector, had issued last, I believe, October or September. So that, yes, a unlimited extension has the effect of simply granting the location of that structure where it is. I certainly don't recommend that we do it beyond August 22, barring some other very good reason. With that, can I ask the members for their input on this, and thanks to town council for looking at this?
Mr. Chairman, would we be able to, and maybe this would be something our town council might weigh in on, if he does have materials that he's not sharing with us, be it he's probably going over this with his lawyer, is there, in addition to saying, hey, we're gonna move on in the next Zoom meeting, can we give him a deadline to make sure we have that material so we're not getting that material on the day of the meeting?
Yes, you can. Yes, definitely. You can make a condition of the continuance based on information being submitted by a certain date. Paul and Nicole can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that they ask for information to be submitted a certain amount of days ahead of time anyway. But yeah, I'm assuming there's going to be some significant submittal, because I think that he's trying to show that it's a pre-existing non-conforming. So it would definitely, Mr. Tenori, it's a great idea to have it ahead of time. It would help me a lot.
Yeah, and this email coming the day of the meeting is just a little worrisome to me that he's going to do it again, and we're not going to have enough time, and we'll have to postpone it again.
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I agree. David, or?
I don't think I need comments. Maybe we continue this to August 19th. Sure, that makes sense.
Oh, sorry, if I read wrong, my mistake. Is it August 19th, Paul? Okay. Alan, your input?
My only suggestion would be maybe make the suggestion to him that common practice I have seen is perhaps if he is unable to appear at his house in the Zoom meeting, maybe his counsel, he can be set up in his counsel's office in some way. That is a common practice also if there's not capability at home.
Yeah, he's notified us that he has counsel or is consulting counsel, so it would be, I think, appropriate to include that in a communication from the chair or from our counsel, noting that. Thank you. Good idea.
Is that email in Dropbox? I didn't look recently. Email that came today.
Paul forwarded this to me yesterday. I don't know if it was forwarded to everybody at the same time. We can forward it.
Dropbox.
It's in Dropbox.
Yes.
Yeah, the failure of that, not failure, the downside of that system is unless you check the Dropbox right before, we don't know what's added there. But it's, the email is there now, so I've gone over most of it orally here. So unless town council wants to offer more advice, I'd ask for a motion to continue this hearing to our next meeting of August 19, 2020 at 7:05 p.m., subject to having the opportunity to receive whatever documents the applicant is referring to.
I would say a week before, Chair.
A week before would be
The 12th.
August 12th. Is there such a motion?
I can make that motion, subject to receiving the documents. When do we receive the documents? I guess that was the proper wording of that.
Well, then I suppose we could come in and have the hearing and simply say, we're supposed to have received documents and we're not going to consider the documents. I don't know, counsel?
Correct. If you're requiring that the documents have to be submitted by August 12th, then if they are not submitted by August 12th, they will not be considered by the board. And that can go on the record on the 19th.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
So the motion has been made. Is there a second, Jim?
I will second that motion.
Any further discussion?
So who made the motion?
David, Brown?
Okay. Okay.
Second by Jim.
Internet problem.
Sorry, Paul?
Nicole was having internet problems, so I'll keep track of that.
Yeah, your video is a little bit broken up, separated from your audio. It's a bit unsettling, but we can see you now.
Well, we're gonna try to keep that consistent. It's just easier for you guys making the minutes, unless Dave has a problem with that.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. All those in favor of that motion to continue with the direction that documents be received no later than the 12th of August, 1 week prior to the meeting, but that we will take it up for consideration at that meeting.
Aye.
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 Sorry, I have to ask for a roll call. Mr. Wren, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Mr. Tenori?
Yes.
And Mr. Noel votes yes as well. That matter is continued to 7:05 on the 19th. We'll work on getting a communication to Mr. Redmond, and I don't think we know who his attorney is yet. Do you, Paul?
No, we not.
Okay. Well, we'll get that communication out in the next few days so that it's very clear. And thank you, counsel, for your help.
You're welcome, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask for a 1-minute break because I just realized I don't have my paperwork in front of me.
Yes, of course.
Even if 5 minutes go out, and I just got upstairs and get it.
Yes, Absolutely.
Thank you.
I don't know how to break from a Zoom meeting except to turn out the cameras off, but I'm gonna sit here and read the papers. I've got a desk full. We used to just say, hey, somebody go print off the documents for us. Now we can't do that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for getting it from my house and distributing them.
Oh, the notebooks, yeah, the famous notebooks. There may still be 2 notebooks on my front porch. I'm not sure if,
I've
Alan,
driven by your house 4 times.
well, I'll pick them up.
Yes,
I'll put a little flag out. The flag is for you to go. Oh,
I appreciate it. About 4 a.m. tomorrow morning, if you can be out there waving it, it'd be.
I'll do that. Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll do that. I'll carry them on my run tomorrow morning.
Perfect.
My 3-mile trot. It's not quite a run anymore. Okay, the next item on the agenda at 7:23 is a comprehensive permit application under Chapter 40B for property located at 195 Mansfield Ave. The applicant is AR Building Company. The owner is the Gus Nominee Trust. This is the first 40B that we've had with the newly constituted, newly populated board. We have with us tonight also, for this matter, Town Council, Amy Questle, and also Ms. Judy Barrett of, I believe it's Barrett Consulting, who is here pursuant to a grant, I believe, that Town Planner Mr. DiGiuseppe managed to arrange to provide some assistance as to procedures that we are to follow and go through in considering this 40B application. Just very briefly, under Chapter 40B, and I'll be corrected by Council and or Ms. Barrett, I'm sure, under Chapter 40B, the Affordable Housing Act, if a town has fewer than 10% of its housing stock deemed affordable under formula, a Chapter 40B application can be made to the town, and basically all of the town departments and considerations get marshaled through the zoning board for consideration, except for certain things that have to do with environmental concerns, environmental laws, which still must meet state standards or get funneled through the the Office of Environmental, what is it called in the town?
Conservation Commission.
Thank you, Conservation Commission, and our conservation officer. I don't know if she's on the line tonight or not. I will note that the applicant is being represented by Peter Freeman, who I recognize. Mr. Freeman also has the opportunity to correct all my errors. But just as a very brief introduction, the Board of Select Persons in February did endorse this project. It is under the Department of Housing and Community Development Local Initiative Program, or LIP program. The Board of Selectmen have submitted a letter of endorsement finding that this project fits with the town's needs and is located in an appropriate location. Board of Select Persons emphasize that the property is in an area that has sewer services and water and is in close proximity to retail and other business uses, namely right next to what we called until 3 weeks ago the Roche Brothers Plaza. Property has a total area of 4.46 acres, 4.2 acres buildable, with a just under a tenth of an acre sized wetland area. Property currently has one single-family home, garage, and other improvements located on it, all of which will be demolished if this project is approved. Project will have 27 studio units, 32 one-bedroom units, 31 two-bedroom units, 10 three-bedroom units, for a total of 100 rental apartments with 151 bedrooms and 179 parking spaces, which is, the applicant states, more than required. We'll get into that in a few minutes. The prevailing zoning uses in the immediate area around the property are commercial and industrial, with the shopping and retail directly adjacent, known as the Great Woods Marketplace Shopping Center. One feature mentioned is that the applicant proposes to install a sidewalk between the development and the Great Woods Marketplace Shopping Center. And the town of Norton has not achieved its 10% affordable housing number, and therefore, I believe by law, is presumed to have a substantial need for affordable housing. The applicant is proposing that, according to state law, 25% of those units will be deemed affordable and offered at rates that are deemed affordable under the state statute. I think I summarized that correctly. I'll offer to introduce, if it's Mr. Freeman that's going to be speaking on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Freeman, you have to unmute yourself. Which may be the last time I ever asked Peter Freeman to unmute himself, but no.
Okay, I just got it. I'm sorry with technology. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members and the whole town for setting up in these challenging times the Zoom hearing.
Mr. Freeman, are you leading the charge for the applicant?
Yes, I will be quite short, despite your concern about needing to meet me in the future. But in any event, let me introduce our team first.
Thank you.
From the applicant, we have, that's our building company, Jason Kibitz is here, and he will actually give the first presentation because the background of the company is relevant, and then a brief description.
Could you please, the identities on the screen are, I think, different than the name you called out. What is the people's name on your team? Could you just be clear?
Okay, so it's Jason Kibitz, it's K-A-N as in Mary, B as in boy, I, T as in Tom, S-I-S. And I think he may be on the same screen with our architect, Jeffrey Campbell, who was here. And then from Decreed Engineering, our engineer, civil engineer, is Brandon Carr. And we also have Scott Thornton from Vanasse Associates, who is our traffic engineer. So the remarks would really be pretty short anyway, in the chairman's thorough summary of some of the details of the application certainly suffices for what I was going to cover. The only other things I would point out, and then finally just the technical jurisdictional things about having standing, that this is a local initiative program, and that's very important. It does have the support, as the chairman indicated, from the select board. But in addition, we also went to pains to meet, even before we started talking to the selectmen, to meet with town staff quite a long time ago, and then the selectmen. And then even before we filed the application more recently with you folks, we met with staff. This time it was virtual in this new world a few weeks ago, and we appreciate that opportunity orchestrated by Paul DiGiuseppe, so thank you. That was very helpful to us. The application is very thorough. It has all the descriptive material, and narrative describing the project, and of course the plans. So the only other thing that I would say, just the technical jurisdictional things which are covered in the narrative at the start of the application. Under 40B, you have to show that you are a limited dividend organization, and we've done that because we have the project eligibility letter from DHCD. And of course, we agree at the conclusion of this, and with the final approval later from the state subsidizing agency, the client, the applicant, will enter into the so-called regulatory agreement that covers the limited dividend elements and the affordability requirements. And then the second component is site control, and we do have site control. We have a purchase and sale agreement with the owner, and that is part of the package in the application. And then thirdly, we have to show that we actually are eligible to receive this approval by a subsidizing agency, and we have that from DHCD's, Department of Housing and Community Development's project eligibility letter dated May 26, 2020, under the WIP Local Initiative Program, and that is also in the application. The final thing that I will say, which I typically do, we have included the request for waivers, which is part and parcel of 40B. There actually are not all that many, but my experience shows me that it's usually more useful to go over the waivers at a later meeting after you have gotten familiar with everything, including perhaps peer review. Certainly, if you'd like to go over them at the end of our presentation, we're happy to, but that's my typical experience. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jason Kimbitsis for the overview, and then to Brandon Carr, Brandon Carr, and then Jeffrey Campbell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I see there's items posted on the screen now.
Great.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's Jason Kambitsis from AR Building. Reiterate what Peter said. Thanks for putting this together and being here this evening. So, give a little brief background on who we are. AR Building is a multifamily real estate development company located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We build, buy, and manage all of our own property. We have over 9,000 units in 10 states. We hold everything for portfolio. So over the 50 years of the ownership of this company, we've probably sold maybe 200 or 300 units. So, we're a little different in that sense that we don't build something and then flip it. We build it and hold it. We're owned by one guy. There's no partners, no investors. There's a small group of us that work at the company. It's a family-owned business, and will be for generations. So, always try to tell everybody that when we come and build a project, the people that built it, you can call us up because we're still here. I've got a property we're doing right now in Pittsburgh. We just finished up. I get a call from a fire chief. Hey, can you donate this year? It's the same number as it was 6 years ago. So, that's the kind of company you are and who we are. So, what we're going to show tonight is a little background into the kind of product we build. These are just display pictures of properties that we have. On the left is a property in Cranberry Township, PA, called Chatham Commons, 128 unit complex. On the right is a place in Cumberland, Rhode Island, called Highland Hills. It's a 200 unit complex. And there's some interior shots of some units. Brandon, you go to the next one. As you can tell, we've been very busy here in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And right now we're sitting in Connecticut for another meeting, but beyond all the product we built in Pittsburgh, we have our own construction office there that I oversee. We have another one in Westerly, Rhode Island that we oversee that builds all of our New England projects. As you can see, we have Dowling Village, which we just opened up in North Smithfield. Highland Hills, I just talked about. Kettle Point, we're finishing that one up. That's in East Providence, Rhode Island. Reynolds Farm, we're finishing that up. It's in Kingstown. We have one in Groton. Parcel J in New London, well done next year. 60 Mansfield Road, we finished a couple years ago. And then we have another phase of Mansfield called Mansfield 2 that we're going to start either later on this year or early next year. So, we've been quite busy and we want to continue to do more projects. This will be our first 40B. We have other ones coming up, but this is the first one we're taking through the process, and hopefully get a favorable outcome here. You can go to the next page, Brandon. Again, this just shows you what we have. This is Reynolds Farm. Jeff will get into this a little bit more, but this kind of shows you the fit and the quality of what we do because we own these properties for portfolio and for generations. We use brick, we use AZAC siding, vinyl siding. The products that we use in there are long-lasting products. We do that because since we own them, we want to maintain them. We don't want to have a product that's going to fall off the building. We don't have a product that's not going to look good in 10 years. We want a building that's going to look good 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road. And the stuff that we've built in the past still looks new in that sense because we maintain them to a high quality and we build them to a high quality. Again, the big picture is Reynolds Farm. Parcel J is in the top right, which is under construction. Kettle Point, and then Mansfield Road in New London, Connecticut. Next page. We're going to move over to Jeff Campbell here. my architect. He's going to talk a little bit about the project some more, but we'll hit a little bit on the location. So we talked about next to the shopping center, right on Mansfield Avenue. Jeff, you want to take it over here?
Sure. So as you had, I'm sorry, I should say, my name is Jeff Campbell. I'm an architect with Rothschild Doino Collaborative. We've been an architect working with AR Buildings since 1997. I've personally been working with them for about 16 years now. All the projects that you've seen, we've been the architect for, and it's something we really appreciated the relationship because, as Jason mentioned, they do all their work, they do own it, and we're always learning from each project and making the next one better. So it's always great to step into the next site or the next project to kind of bring all these ideas together. As Jason was starting to mention, here we are at 195 Mansfield Ave. You can see the shopping center directly to the south. The site is outlined in red there, the long, skinny site. Our only street access is actually off of Mansfield, so we just have a small frontage there, and then we don't actually front the wetland in back. We're cut off by the adjacent property that you see to the southeast. So it just gives a general overview. Brandon, if you could step to the next slide. Thank you. And then just a quick introduction. I think I'll give a quick brief overview of kind of some of the site conditions, show the architecture briefly, and then Brandon can get into some of the more technical details of the site. But really here we tried to do a topographical map to try to relate what's going on with the site. You can see there are wetlands to the east, not quite touching the lake, but there's a wetland area there and a small setback. You can see the grade actually slopes pretty significantly off to the right, off to the east on the page. There's also a little bit of a cross slope, so the top of the page is, has some significant grade difference, and that's presented some challenges when we look at the site. I think we've addressed it pretty well. I think go to the next page, Brandon. Thank you. And so this is a conceptual plan of what we're proposing. Right now it is 100 units, so you can see that breakdown on the bottom. It's a mixture of studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms. It's essentially 4 stories. This is the ground floor that we're showing, but it essentially stacks for 4 stories. In working with the municipality, we really tried to get into traffic flow and made sure we were good with the fire marshal. Recognized the one entrance to the north would be the most sensible entrance. We wanted to make sure the building had a drop-off area that was very visible from the street as well. So you see there's a little bit of a knuckle that we've created there. One of the advantages is that actually creates another knuckle on the south side, which gives a nice exposure for a pool that we have, some nice amenities. You can kind of get a sense here, and we do have the architectural diagram, so I'd be happy to go into more detail if appropriate. We will have a nice common space as you walk in. We have a lounge area, fitness area. Actually, because of the way the site's configured, we'll have a 2-story space as you work from the cross grade here. So we actually have the road on the top of the page, the north, if you will, is about 1 story higher than it is in the south. So this gives a general overview. You can also see, and as Brandon mentioned, we have kind of protected and really backed off the wetland that we have and that slope grade that we have on the eastern end of the site. And then if you go to the last one, Brandon. Thank you. And this is a perspective, trying to get a sense of what that looks like. So this is, you were hovering over Mansfield, kind of hovering over the shopping center, so you can see that pool area. As Jason mentioned, we do like to make sure we have materials that will last. Brick is featured pretty heavily in all their work because of the maintenance and the idea that it stands the test of time in there. The condensing units, you can see from this view, we've got a couple notches in the roof. Those are actually made to hide the condensing units, so rather than have farms on the ground, you'll often see these are actually hidden up in the roof so that they're invisible. Really tried to make sure we had an integral loop. This building, as with all the AR buildings, is elevator, so you can get an elevator access to every unit. They meet accessibility requirements, so we have quite a few Type A, which are fully adaptable units, and then all the other units have Type B requirements, which can manipulate and get a wheelchair through the unit. We have also provided porches for every unit. We have typically about 6-foot by 18-foot porches. It's a great amenity. We have really large windows. There's a lot of light in the unit. These are all things that people responded very well to. It kind of sets AR apart what they've done. So that's an introduction to the site, I think, or to the architecture. I think, Brandon, I can hand it to you maybe to talk about the site.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Brandon Carr with Decreed Engineering. We have offices in Dedham, Massachusetts, and Cranston, Rhode Island. We've been working with AR for maybe 6 or 7 years now. We've done the majority of the Rhode Island projects, and we're starting to do a few in Massachusetts right now, including this one, obviously. So I'm just going to walk through a little bit more on the existing additions and then the proposed stormwater utilities, things like that. Jeff did a pretty good job covering most of it, but I'll present off his drawings. I also have the engineering drawings, but his are a little prettier than mine sometimes, so better for this format. So, as Jeff said, site's pretty much fairly long and skinny rectangular lot. Just to talk about the wetlands a little bit, the reservoir itself doesn't actually come onto our site, as Jeff said, but there is a bordering vegetated wetland here in the back of the site. And we went before the Conservation Commission last fall to verify that edge, before we started our design, to make sure we were adhering to the proper setbacks and buffers that we need to that wetland edge. So that edge has been verified before Concom, so they've seen this site. We actually filed concurrently with them for the notice of intent permit, and we are on their Monday night hearing coming up here. So the wetland, and just to point out too, the wetland buffer, even though this is a 40B project, we are meeting all the town requirements for their wetland setbacks, the no-touch buffer, and the stormwater system requirements. So just for the proposed site, Jeff covered the circulation pretty well. The main entrance on the northern end of the site there. The entrance you see on the southern piece kind of jutting in is a emergency entrance or exit only for fire apparatus or any type of emergency vehicles that would be responding to the site. That came up at one of the early meetings with the town staff and mainly the fire department, asking for a second set of access and also an easier way to make the, if they're majority of the time we'll be responding to the site from the south, so making that right into the site and being on the south side of the building, opposed to having to come into that northern entrance and take a sharp U-turn to get on that southern side of the building or loop around back. So we've been looking at that entrance as more of a mountable curb, or basically trying to make it not look like a roadway, so that people don't come in off the street. If you're visiting the building, if you're coming from the south, you don't see that driveway and think that's how you enter the site. But making it accessible enough for the trucks, and working with a gate with a key, set back far enough where they can pull the truck in, let themselves in, let themselves out. So we're working out the specifics of that with the fire department and also with Mass DOT. Since Mansfield Avenue is a DOT road, we have to obtain permits for them from them. So we're working out that kind of geometry and the access there. And we have met with Mass DOT early on in the process to go over the site plan and get their initial feedback. And for the most part, they've agreed conceptually with what we've proposed here. Public water and sewer coming off of Mansfield Avenue, pretty straightforward. Utility connections in the front Mansfield Ave side of the building there, so they're pretty short runs to the building. Again, at the staff meetings, we've coordinated with the water department, kind of gone back and forth items with them prior to the filing. So the plans that we submitted have their kind of initial comments addressed on them. Sewer, gravity sewer out the northern side of the building to a sewer main in Mansfield Avenue. Gas and electric also coming off of Mansfield Avenue. For stormwater treatment, we're proposing, as you can see, basically the site pretty much grades to the rear of the site. So a system in the parking area to capture any runoff and bring it to that. We have shown a pond in the back. That's an infiltration basin. And that's sized to provide water quality treatment and also to control and infiltrate the smaller storms. And then for the larger storm events, there's a larger underground system under the back parking lot. So basically, that first few inches of rainfall goes into the pond. Once the pond reaches capacity, before it flows over the berm towards the wetland, it backs up into that underground system, which provides the bulk of the detention for, up to the 100-year storm, so up to 8 inches of rainfall on site, and then slowly releases it into towards the wetland to match the existing flows. And like we said, we met the 25-foot no-touch under the town bylaw, and also the 50-foot setback for the pond under both the state and the town regulations. And we've submitted a full stormwater analysis, soil erosion control plan, and operation and maintenance plan to both the ZBA and the Concom. And then also we've coordinated with the fire department. There is the water department and fire department. There is a hydrant directly out in front of our site that it actually falls in the emergency entrance driveway. So we're proposing to relocate, and they, initial comments were that was adequate for the site. They didn't require an on-site hydrant. Basically, that's kind of the site design. When we get to questions, if anyone has any, more specific questions, I can bring up the engineering plans, and kind of poke through them. But I think for now, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Thornton, who's the traffic engineer on the project and did the traffic study. He's going to give the highlights of that, and then back to Peter, and then for any questions the board may have. So, Scott, I think your slides are, here you go. So.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brandon. So again, my name's Scott Thornton. I'm with Vanessa and Associates. We prepared the traffic study for the project. And, as is standard practice, our traffic study is prepared according to state and local guidelines. We touch base with Paul and the town of Mansfield. We also had some preliminary discussions with Mass DOT District 5. As Brandon indicated, we had a meeting down there early on in the process to get their take on the project and the impact on Route 140. We did some traffic counts out there prior to the COVID pandemic emergence, and looked at the morning and the evening time periods. We also looked at the daily time period to get an idea of the traffic flow in the area. Also looked at crash history at 3 intersections in the study area, and we went back 5 years, the most recent available 5 years of crash data, and finding was the crash rates at the intersections were below state averages, so they're not considered to have a significant crash history. We also measured sight distances out at the location of the driveway. We found that there is some vegetation located to the south that should be removed, but in general, we meet the sight distance requirements based on the speeds that were observed. And in terms of the project trip generation, we're looking at about 35 trips during the morning peak hour and 45 trips during the evening peak hour. And compared to what's out there on Route 140 now, that's equivalent to an increase of between 1 and 1.4% during those peak hour time periods. So really a minimal traffic increase compared with the traffic that currently exists out there. Brandon, what's the next slide?
Sorry to interrupt. Is that 35 per hour additional?
It's 35 trips during the morning and evening, or during the morning peak hour. So
There's a 1 peak hour. Okay.
yes. So specifically in the morning, that would be 9 trips entering and 26 trips exiting. So that's the total. The 35 is the total in both directions.
What do you consider peak hours?
I believe we clocked them at 7:30 to 8:30 and 4 to 5. Just double check on that. Yes, I believe that's correct.
Just for the record, sorry, you can't keep us quiet for long.
That's fine.
Just for the record, for everybody in attendance, we can jump in. The board members can surely jump in with quick questions if we didn't hear something right. This is an introduction, and we will all want to study the papers that we have and ask further questions. And for anybody, from the community attending, this does not get finished tonight. This probably takes several sessions, at which time the public will get to ask questions and give their input as well. But we're not there at this point. I just wanted to point that out. These are not the only questions that we'll have and subject matters that we'll want to tease out. I just wanted to point that out. And go ahead, continue.
Sure. Can I just clarify real quick? You said it was 4:30 and 5:30 p.m.?
Yeah, it's based on the traffic, the daily traffic volumes. It varies. In the morning, it varies between 7 and 8, and in the afternoon, really varies between 3 and 5. So there's peak hours occurring at different times at different days, but in general, that's what I was saying. Between 4 and 5 is closest to the typical peak hour in the afternoon.
Understood. I just want to clarify. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So this slide shows the 3 intersections that we looked at. Our driveway is located in proximity to the Auto Part International driveway. We also looked at the Great Woods Marketplace intersection, and to the south, the Freeman Street intersection. And these were the locations that we identified to be really critical to the operations of the site. So again, with those locations, we looked at the crash history, not an issue as far as significance with relation to the DOT crash rates. In terms of operations, project doesn't really have, they're unsignalized intersections, so during peak hours, there tends to be a lot of delay associated with them. When we added the project traffic into the analysis of those intersections, we found that there were no changes in vehicle level of service. The delay levels were generally unchanged. Most of the traffic, once it gets out onto 140, it stays there. So we have, I think, 40% were headed, maybe 50% were headed to the north, and the rest were headed to the south. We had a smaller percentage going down Freeman Street as well.
Did you, and I may interrupt you, did you go further to the intersection of 123 at all?
We did not. Nope. We did not. I would say that if we were to, our impacts are going to decrease as we get further from the site. That traffic is going to split off. So by the time we got to 123, it's likely that we wouldn't have a significant impact if at these locations closest to the site, we're not showing any increases in delay or any significant effects of the project on the delay at the intersections. So then in as far as the recommendations for the site, Brian, the next slide, thank you. So I made the comment about the trees and vegetation should be trimmed to improve the site distance for motorists exiting the site. Any landscaping should be below 24 inches in height, so to present a clear sight line for motorists exiting the site. Stop sign control, obviously with painted stop bars on the driveway. One of the things that we discussed with DOT was making modifications to the median on Route 140 to be reconfigured to allow for left turns into and out of the site driveway. And we'll be coordinating that with District 5 as we get further on in the process. And if there are any pylon signs for the complex, they should be placed again out of the way of those sight lines, out of those sight triangles, so that so they're not conflicting with lines of sight for motorists exiting the site, but also provide enough notice for visitors coming to the site of where the driveway is located. So I'll be around to answer questions afterwards, but I think at this point I'll turn it back over to Attorney Freeman.
All right, thank you. And should be unmuted still. So that is our formal presentation. The only thing I want to quickly add, when I mentioned I thank the staff for their cooperation and assistance through the process. I should have also specifically thanked Mike Unitz, because he, of course, was our initial liaison with the selectmen and very helpful in arranging meetings and through the whole process. So thank you, Mike Unitz, as well. And as we said, that really covers the presentation. The waivers are spelled out in the application. If you wanted to go over them, as I said earlier, that's fine, but we can do that at any time you want. So I think that covers everything for now, and certainly look forward to questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Freeman and your team. We have a notebook of plans. The plans look pretty comprehensive to me. I'm not saying they're perfect or done, but they seem pretty comprehensive, and I appreciate that as somebody who's seen other 40B applications in town before. The list of requested waivers is what we tend to spend a lot of time on to the zoning board members because they are requesting waivers from some town bylaws or regulations specifically for this project. The principal one here that I saw was height. It's a 4-story complex plus with the roof line, of course. Maximum height is 45 feet would be the maximum permitted normally in this zone. They're requesting 62.7. So, that's the type of thing that the list of waivers goes through in some detail. That's what I would urge the board members to look through with some specificity, for the next meetings. With that, can I just ask Judy Barrett to join the conversation and tell us if, to her trained ear, either I've misstated something or Mr. Freeman or his team has misstated something right off the bat that we should be attuned to. And again, this is the introductory meeting. There are going to be several more meetings ahead. Judy, you want to jump in and just bring us to ground here?
No, I think you've done fine. I haven't heard any misstatements whatsoever. I mean, it was good for the board to hear the applicant's whole presentation, and the team being there, I think, is very helpful. I think that this is probably the opportunity, which is sort of where you are right now, with making sure the board has an opportunity to ask their questions. And, you just need to decide whether you want to take public comment tonight or do that a different night. I do think it will be helpful to all of you to decide, if not this evening, then certainly by the next meeting, what issues you think you're going to need assistance reviewing from outside parties, so that the peer review consultants can be lined up to provide that assistance.
Yep.
So far, I think you're doing just fine.
Okay, well, thank you, appreciate that. And that's next on my list as well, the peer review question. For the benefit of the public in attendance and others in attendance, we as the town get to request from the applicant, within reason, some funds to go out and hire our own consultant on things like the typical items, stormwater management, conservation issues. Well, that would be through the Conservation Commission, of course, their peer review. Traffic, for example, if we have doubts as to the traffic report, we can send that out for another study, or actually a review of the study that's been presented, I guess is the proper way to phrase that. So this being all very preliminary, I would suggest that in the past, we've always needed assistance on stormwater management and other site engineering issues. Members, how do you feel about requesting peer review funds for those issues preliminarily? We can take a look at the traffic study, if, for the next meeting and say, wait, we want to question more on this and request further peer review. I'm just saying from past experience, it's normally stormwater management and other site conditions that we usually off the bat say, we'd like a second opinion. And that's really what it amounts to, a second opinion on behalf of the town as the client rather than the applicant.
So Chair, I would like to study the traffic a little bit, because I think, you and I be living in town, I mean, we all live in town, and I know once you get closer to that 123 intersection, you could be there for a half hour trying to get through that light. And that's my initial, they've stopped at Freeman Street, and that's great, but once you get past Freeman Street, you have one extra to get off, or else you're hitting the light. And I think we definitely need to go a little further in that way.
Okay. And we can ask the applicant to provide that further information or study as well. I'm not limiting this to anything tonight. The door's kind of wide open within reason. I'm just asking what preliminarily should we talk to Mr. Freeman about getting some peer review funds set up, because the rule is the applicant has to send them a check to the town, and only then can we actually hire a peer review engineer, for example. Traffic, I haven't looked at the traffic study in any detail. I share Mr. Tenore's concern, and actually looking at the plan, how do you prevent traffic from coming in that fire entrance? I'm interested to hear that. Is there a better way to access or even push something, 20 feet to the east, the whole development? I don't know those things yet. I don't even have those questions lined up yet. I'm just asking preliminarily, how about a peer review engineer? And Jim, you're still on. Do you agree a peer review engineer would be helpful and beneficial?
Yes.
And Mr. Wren, do you agree?
Yes, I think I do. And I had a couple questions regarding the parking.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I maybe misinterpreted things, but so I noticed in the main summary, it says 179 parking spaces, which is 19 more spaces than are required in the local zone. But then, looking for these, because so you have the 179, and it's required 191. So it actually short.
Yeah, I can answer that. Again, it's Brandon Clark, Dupree. The zoning code would require the 191, and the calculations on sheet 6 of our the Dupree engineering plans in the top left. So if you, based on the zoning calculation, 191 spaces are required. We're proposing 179, which, from the history of the developer and the other projects we've done, is actually at the higher end of what they typically see at these types of buildings. Mainly, this one's also very heavily weighted to studios and one bedrooms, so they see a lot less cars. Basically, the town requirement is about 1.9 a unit, and we're proposing 1.8.
So is the narrative not correct then, that it's already exceeding?
I'll speak to that, but I pulled up Peter Freeman again. I pulled up the waiver list, which is Brandon just mentioned. They show the waiver request. If it states differently in the narrative, I apologize. I must have missed that. But as Brandon just said, we believe we have more than plenty of spaces, but yes, it would require a waiver of 12 spaces.
It sounds like maybe the narrative is not accurate there, Jim.
I think it might be a function of I think that the slide itself, maybe we can call it back up enough, but I think it's misleading. I was going to raise that point to you, because I realized, in thinking about the waivers, I think that, I'm sure you heard me, but I think that our architect, Jeff Campbell, mentioned that we comply with the parking, and again, we are looking for a waiver, so I apologize.
Let's just look at that discrepancy, because the narrative says that there's 19 more than required, and the waivers seem to say otherwise. So Jim, good catch. I didn't.
Yeah, on the slide here, it's 191 required, provided 179.
Brandon, do you want to bring up your civil drawings? That might be the most accurate. So I need the correct counsel now.
Just bringing those up.
While Brandon brings that up, let me just, for conversation, as a developer, we always want to have enough parking for all of our people. We don't want to have people being crunched. That could be an issue in parking. We really see 1.2 1.3 spaces per unit is really where we're at. We've actually been into communities where they limit it to 1.2 at this point in a suburbanized location such as this. Now, I'm just giving you as an anecdotal evidence as to what we do and deal with every day, that even at 179, that's what we would call overparked for what we do. And again, from our perspective, we never want to be underparked, because then you have trouble running apartments if people can't park their cars. So I'm just throwing it out there just for you guys to think about that as well.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense. I was just confused because it was kind of.
Of course.
And just to clarify, I don't have the narrative piece in front of me here, but this is page 6 of our plans. This has the detailed parking calculation. So you can see that the town's zoning required for multifamily is based on the number of bedrooms. So basically, studios and one beds require 1.75 spaces per unit, 2 for 2 bedrooms and 2.5 for 3 bedrooms. And then the mix is here. It's 27. This is the proposed mix out of the 100 units. 27 are studio, 32 are one bed, 31 are 10. Are 2 beds, and then 10 are 3 bedrooms. So here's the calculation done out. So that's how we get to the 191 spaces required, and then we're proposing the 179. So
That's appreciated. The narrative is what I was reading from it, my introduction, and that's probably put together by Mr. Freeman, and perhaps the numbers were just wrong there. That was I think the basis of the question.
My mistake, I was, going through some personal things, and sorry you missed it.
Yeah,
Chairman,
That's okay.
may I ask a question?
of course, yes, please.
If the applicant's experience is typically the demand is less than this, why are you proposing so much parking? I'm just curious, because this is high compared to what I see in other Chapter 40B multifamily developments. So I'm just wondering, what's the rationale for so much?
Well, I mean, the rationale, from a clear perspective, is that it does fill out the site. We're happy to do less. I mean, realistically, we actually went in with, I think, the last bay of it not even being in there. So I mean, we could come at it with less parking. I mean, we really don't need the 179 spots, but we're happy to discuss that further. It's
Yeah, I would.
There may be opportunities here for better use of some open space for the rest.
Sure.
I mean, it's the board's decision, but, there are always opportunities to make better amenities for residents, and if too much of the site is being chewed up in pavement, that really takes away from amenity space.
Yeah, and I would say that really where you would want to get rid of parking would be on the far right there, that last row. And I can't answer how many are in there right now, but I would say you want to get rid of that, because that really is the least usable because of where the building sits and people getting to it. And I imagine you probably have, 15, 20 spots there that could be gone, but yeah, we're open to that. It's fine.
18.
Okay, so.
And just to add, we've done projects where like the stormwater system is designed to handle the additional parking, and we don't build, say, 20 spaces, and if they're ever needed in the future, we can add them at that point.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that we could,
Okay, we also have to keep in mind the requirement for turning radius of the fire apparatus and things of that sort. Good question, Judy, and I'd like to look back at the other projects that we've authorized and see what the parking per unit is there, or is it based on per person? What's the 1.2 number?
It's basically per unit.
Per bedroom though, or per unit?
Per unit. Typically it's expressed per unit.
Yeah. And if you all are able to provide, I see the calculation, but if you're able to provide justification, we'd certainly be in support of a reduction in parking, as long as you still have, you can still park everyone that needs a space. Because in this site, you're coming up against the wetland buffer. You do have I realize you're not on the reservoir, but you can still see a portion of the reservoir. It would be, I've walked the site, I can point, it would be nice to have a public, an amenity for these people to be able to enjoy that view. And if you were able to bring this parking back, as you're suggesting, I think that creates a win-win.
Well, I would just point out that the number of spaces that have been approved in other developments isn't necessarily an indicator of demand. the real issue is what's the actual parking demand in the other developments? Because, I mean, I'm just speaking as a planner. My experience is most towns do require way too much parking, and so when you get
Yeah.
that, and you've got empty parking spaces, you may have developed something that conforms with local zoning, but the demand isn't really there. So I'm not advocating for a demand study. I'm just saying I don't think that the number of spaces permitted in other developments is necessarily an indicator.
Okay,
That's all I'm trying to say.
okay, so the number is open for consideration and maybe in flux already. That's fine.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask one, can I just,
Of course.
if you were able to reduce the number of parking spots, could that affect another part of your parking waiver? And this is probably for the developer. I don't think I can answer that question, but you request, the requirement a 19 by 19 stall, you're doing a 19 by 18 stall because you're probably looking to add more parking. Could you expand to the required 19 by 19 if you reduce some of the spots? It's just something to look at. Might be a triple effect for you guys.
We have to look at that, yeah.
Yeah, I think we can. I think one of the challenges to that is the overall depth of the space, because we have a narrow lot. That 19 by 19, 19 by 18 is actually kind of constricted on the narrow direction rather than the longer direction, but we can absolutely look at that.
Yeah, it's just something I thought maybe if we can maybe kill two birds with one stone first thing.
And also maybe ask the town to take a look at it.
Bless you.
Luckily, I'm here, not there.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, exactly. That would only be for the benefit of the guy to your left, so.
He's been with me all day.
Yeah. Okay, if I could get back to the peer review question, I'd like to do that. Members, do you feel it appropriate to request a peer review, engineering peer review of the site plans, including stormwater?
I think that makes sense, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And Judy Barrett, that is a typical thing to do, correct, in 40Bs in this area in Massachusetts? What is the peer review process that we are supposed to follow?
Do you have rules and regulations for engaging peer review consultants? Do you have consultants you typically work with?
We do through the planning board.
Pardon me?
We do through the planning board, and through previous 40Bs, we've used, have consulting firms that we'll use.
I mean, Mr. Chair, I've just seen it done in so many different ways. Some towns do a procurement for every single project. Some towns have a pool of 3 or 4 consultants they work with, and they just go through the list. Some towns have a specific consultant that they always work with.
We've had different consultants over the years that I've been involved.
Yeah.
I don't know if the town is on one now that it likes from the planning board review viewpoint or conservation. I don't know that.
Okay.
We could certainly inquire. I would request of the applicant that some funds be made available into a peer review account. I believe that's appropriate at this time. Mr. Freeman, have you reviewed that with your clients?
Sure, yeah, we actually, this board has always been reasonable, you folks have been, so, the reasonable amount is the initial payment on
Well,
that.
I haven't done this in a couple of years. What is a reasonable amount at this point? 20,000, 15?
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
we need to get a proposal from a consultant, and then that amount will go into the peer review fund.
Okay.
So I think that between Judy and I, we will find a consultant for you. There's a few that Judy and I have used recently that are very good, and so I think that we can do that. I'm not sure when you plan on continuing this hearing too, but we will need enough time to choose our peer review consultant, or at least get a proposal from one or more, and then have some money put into the 53G account so that consultant could then do their initial review. I think your idea of engineering and stormwater is perfect because that's usually the first thing that consultants start with, because if the engineering doesn't work, things need to change.
Okay. So I guess the first step is to send the plans that we have out to a 1 or 2 or 3 peer review potential consultants. I'm going to defer to Paul or others here as to who we've been using in town in the last year or two. That's all I'm saying.
And I think that's fine. I think that, what will probably be the most helpful to everybody is get the proposal, as Amy suggested. That's then going to determine what the applicant needs to ask for.
Larger firms that are using statewide.
Sorry, Paul, you're breaking up pretty badly. Maybe you should try dialing in, Paul.
I think he's frozen.
Yeah, he's frozen.
Maybe it's frozen anyway. Paul, maybe you can dial in on your cell phone, continue that way? Because we
I seem to have a bad internet connection here, but I work with a number here.
I think Paul is agreeing with everything we've said.
I do too.
So let's proceed on that. Then we'll get it to Mr. Freeman on behalf of the applicant to say that he's comfortable with the peer review consultant and 1 or 2 bids, and we can go from there. Do we need to read it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may. The applicant can only contest the peer review consultant if the applicant feels that there is a conflict, or if the applicant feels that the peer review consultant is not qualified. I can assure you that the peer review consultants that Judy and Paul and myself will recommend are qualified. So really, the only way that the applicant can contest the peer review consultant is if there's a conflict, which every consultant that we use runs a conflict check. So it should be fine.
So then we get a proposal, and at the next meeting, we present that or have presented it to the applicant, and we vote on an amount to request. Is that right? It has to be at a meeting?
Sure, you could do that, or you could direct the planning director to take that task on. It could be considered an administrative task.
So we have a meeting scheduled for next week, but we are opening a different 40B next week.
Yeah.
I don't know if anything could be accomplished by 7 days from now anyway.
Right, probably not.
Yeah, the meeting after that is the aforementioned August, is it 19? I keep forgetting, August 19. So can we see what we can get done for that meeting with an
Sure. So if the board is so inclined, we could get a proposal and then have that consultant start working, and therefore on the 19th there might be some kind of report as to the plans that they've been able to look at. Or you could, if the board wants to be involved in the proposal, then we could present the proposal to the board and they could then vote on that proposal. But right now, I think that the charge is to get proposal for engineering, site engineering, civil design, and stormwater, which is pretty straightforward.
That is my proposal. I'm just trying to move it along, and I don't know if we're required to do the next step at a meeting or if we could ask our planning director.
You are not.
Okay, so I would ask our planning director to move forward on that to get a proposal, because the next step, I guess, is we have to ask the applicant to supply the funds so that the proposal can be acted on.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad to see there's a cat in attendance. That's at least one cat in attendance. That's nice. I just never chaired a meeting where there's been a cat before. That's fine. Don't worry.
I think he had a comment. I don't know if you saw him.
Sorry, Jim?
The attorney, Paul Freeman, had a.
Thank you for that. However, the point was, the point was already covered by Ms. Wessel and Judy Barrett. Thank you.
David?
Any other questions?
Okay. Alan, are you okay with this plan?
Yes, sir. My only other question would have been landscape peer review and traffic, like we talked about. Please.
Um,
I'm not sure if landscaping is a common one or not now.
It's been done, yeah. I didn't look at these plans with landscaping in mind, and I haven't looked in detail at the traffic review, so I didn't have a question about that yet. Kind of was going to ask that at the next meeting if I had concerns. If you feel it's appropriate to ask for a traffic review, peer review as well, now's the time. Now's a time to speak up.
I was agreeing with Jim about the intersection at 123. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna put it on the forefront. That's one of my major concerns.
Adding traffic to the bottleneck at 123, intersection of 123 and 140.
Yeah.
Okay, so the applicant can try to address this at the next meeting. We can also ask for a peer review for the traffic study as well. Is that what the board is intending? Sorry, I'm looking at your pictures on the screen, looking for either nods or verbal assent.
You guys can do it.
It is southwest areas, but I guess I was thinking it really makes sense to let the applicant come back for the wrong traffic study for that intersection. Before we go
An
on.
opportunity first? Okay, that's fine with me. That's what I was thinking initially. Asking them to do that. Asking them to expand the scope of what they looked at, and then at the next meeting, if we still have questions, we could say we want a traffic peer review as well. I don't think we'll be delayed in the process very much doing that. Is that okay, Jimmy?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I think, and just as a matter of just record, I think the board can agree or disagree, but I think we're okay going Mansfield side towards 495. I don't particularly see a ton of backup there, except when, you know, Great Woods is in with contracts, who knows how that's gonna go, but I have no concern going south toward 123 into center and northern here. We've had, I mean, I've sat there for quite a long time.
Yeah, understood. So we'd ask the applicant to supplement the traffic report to the extent possible, or tell us why they can't do so, or that it would take so much time or effort, that sort of thing, and ask them to report back to us at the next meeting, hopefully.
I would be comfortable with that.
Okay. And that's,
I was just thinking aloud, but having traffic heading the other way, heading to Roosevelt Street, there's no building going in there, a hotel, and,
yep.
you know, like more traffic to that road. There'd be no traffic, I would agree, I don't know which way to go, but there's a lot of traffic going towards Mansfield. On top of that new development, Mansfield.
Well, that's also the area in which the next 40B that we're going to take up is situated. So, I mean, I think that whole stretch of 140 is, you know, somebody's going to have to rethink that. Bigger minds than we have, I guess. But,
Yeah.
you know, there's going to have to be a lot of changes there. All we can ask this applicant to do is tell us what their plan is going to do to the area, or that they project it will do to the area, and how they can mitigate that. I heard about painting in the, you know, making a turn lane there. Does that require expansion of the road at that point? That's one question I have going forward. Applicant, do you know if you go ahead?
Yeah, Scott Thornton with Vanessa. There's sufficient pavement there because we're just north of the intersection with the auto park driveway. It's really a matter of revising the pavement markings so that, because there's yellow lines there in the median, and when we discussed it with DOT, they were interested in stretching out that median a little bit further to the north so that we would have enough space for cars to queue into that we're turning left into the driveway, but there is sufficient right-of-way and pavement width to accommodate that.
Okay, so it wouldn't require you to make road improvements, or the town, you're saying?
No, well, any kind of improvements that we would do, we would, that would be on our nickel, but it's most likely it's just modifications of the pavement markings, and you know, if we haven't gotten too far along with DOT as to what exactly they're looking for there, but that's something that we expect to address shortly.
Okay.
And as far as the other the other comment, Mr. Tenori's comment about the adding the intersection of Route 123 and 140, we can, the only caveat to that is that we may need to look at some older data, because we can't go out and do traffic counts right now, because it's, you know, it's not appropriate. Traffic is you know, 20% of what it typically is, but I do believe the 140 corridor study looked at that intersection, and we may be able to use some of their data and add our, you know, adjust it to current conditions, and then add our project traffic into that. And we can have that answer by the next time we meet.
Okay, that, great, thank you.
Sure.
Jim? Yes.
I was going to suggest also, Paul, Cumberland Farms did a traffic study that covered that intersection, correct? And that possibly might be able to be used? That intersection was covered recently?
Cumberland Farms on 123?
Yes. Yes, they did provide it to both applicants, the traffic study. Hello?
I'm sorry, and does this applicant have that traffic study to look at? Or to incorporate?
Yeah, I think we do. We just looked at that for the traffic volumes from the Cumberland Farms development to add into our background conditions, but we'll take another look and see if that intersection volume is there. And if so, we'll just use that.
I understand what you're saying about COVID and traffic being off, so you gotta rely on the other older studies, right, rather than doing one now. Interesting.
Right.
Okay. Other topics that we can either knock off or start knocking on tonight? I think getting the peer review firm or firms in line is an appropriate next step. It's been the practice of this board to open a meeting to public comment toward the end of the meeting each time. If not each time, most of the times. If there's not any further work that we can do in getting this pushed further down the road, pardon the pun, I would ask if there's any member of the public who wishes to be heard at this time, either having questions or comments generally. We'll do our best to either answer them or ask the applicant to answer them either now or at a next meeting. So I'm going to need you to speak up by phone, unmute yourself. I see Mr. Madden, Wes Madden. And you need to unmute yourself if you have a question.
Yep, sorry about that.
We ask people to state their name and their address.
Sure, Wes Madden, and I'm at 199 Mansfield Ave, right next door. The only concern I have is with me buying that property as a commercial property, and now that this is going to be a residential property going in to commercial property, I'm a little concerned with the residents having access to the back of my property and the additional liability I might incur with them going down to the water and maybe, you know, trying to fish or kayak or whatever right off of my property. So,
Hey, Mr. Madden, what is your property? Could you describe where it is?
it's adjacent to, right next door, 199 Mansfield Ave. So it's
Right from the street, not the McDonald's, Great Woods Plaza, the other side. To the south.
Okay, what is there, Mr. Madden, at this, I can't picture it.
We just moved in last Labor Day. We run a heating oil company out of there.
Okay,
So we have, we don't use the back end of the property by the water, but it is open, and I'm just concerned with the residents using that and accessing it to get to the reservoir and any kind of liability I might have in that.
so do you own the property that is between the reservoir and the site that's being discussed?
Next door. Adjacent, they're 195 and 199.
I understand, but somebody owns the property between 195 and the reservoir. That's not you?
No, I think that's the mobile park, I believe.
That's what I thought as well. Okay, so you are next to them.
Correct.
Okay, so I see there are tree buffers. Is there any plan for fencing? Is fencing even desired from the applicant's view or from the town's view? That's a question that this gentleman is asking. Go ahead, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Madden. I did get an email and a phone call from Mr. Madden's attorney, and he mentioned this concern, and said that was really the only concern, which we appreciate. So what we said is that we certainly would agree to reasonable fencing, work out the details. We also did point out, which the zoning board certainly can appreciate, that not just because we don't own all the way down to the water, but anything that gets within even 100 feet and certainly 50 feet of the wetlands and the wetlands itself would be jurisdictional for the Conservation Commission. So we can't promise that we can do something even if we want to in every area that it might be logical to do it, unless we get the Conservation Commission approval. So I don't know, Mr. Madden, if Mr. Crawford had a chance to talk about that with you, but we certainly understand your concern, and we definitely agree to work with you. But I just wanted to have everybody aware of that that requirement to be contingent on whatever the Concom might approve.
And we're not, as the board, we're not saying that we're in favor of fencing there either. I mean, there have been other instances where we've said fencing kind of ruins the, the ambiance of what's there. I don't know what's there yet, but we certainly take Mr. Madden's concern into consideration, and that'll be a topic for further discussion going forward. Is that okay, Mr. Madden, at this point?
Yeah, I would, just like to explain that I do support the project. Seems like a good outfit. I like the renderings. I don't have any problem with that. That's my only concern.
Understood. And this is a process, and I appreciate your input. This will go forward over the next few meetings, so there'll be an opportunity to converse with the team, the development team, and the board as well, as we make decisions. So thank you.
Sure, so I appreciate it.
I have one question for Mr. Madden.
Yes.
Mr. Madden, is the apartment complex, is that right up to you on the left-hand side if you're looking at your property? Like those apartment, homes?
Yeah, they'd be on the left. Yeah.
Do you have any problems now with them coming across?
No, not at all.
Is there I can't remember if there's a fence there or not.
There's not, but their property doesn't go, it's very thick wooded. Right after their backyard, they have a regular sized backyard, and then it's thick woods.
Excellent.
So we haven't really had any problem with that.
Okay.
With this one here, when you get past our storage garage, it's wide open to the reservoir, so it would be a natural, it's a game trail through there. A lot of deer and everything go down there, so it's actually a beautiful spot, and they'll have a beautiful view behind their facility too. I just don't want it to be too tempting a view for people to be hanging out down there and accessing the reservoir through my property. That's all.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom, this is Alan.
Yes.
Two comments on that. Maybe some signage could be agreed upon to start at a bare minimum.
In other words, saying don't go beyond a certain point.
Correct. And the other thing, maybe this is something that could be appreciated more if we were going to do a site visit at any time. Would be a list of something to look at if we were to.
That's another issue we can bring up. I think, was there an opportunity for a site visit a few months ago during the winter? I think there might have been.
There was.
Yeah, I wasn't able to go to that. At some point, do the board members want to plan something now? That's fine. The applicant has to give permission. We have to be invited there, of course, because it's liability, and I think we have to abide by town council's rules as well, because we are invited guests on their property. Does the board wish to go out there in the next month before the next meeting? We have to schedule a meeting, I think, to do that. But what's the board's feeling, David? Either.
I think it'd be a great idea. I mean, personally, I don't know what time doing it during the week. Once it's at night.
I have the same problem for the next few weeks. Anyway, it doesn't have to be before August 19th. I'm just, Alan brought it up. Jim?
And maybe it would be better after the next meeting that there would be more questions if we had more at the time. Maybe after another meeting would be more appropriate anyway.
Yeah, I was going to suggest the same. I wouldn't mind probably doing it. Although I got to be honest with you, because of COVID, my hours at work changed, so I'm now working nights, as some of the people have seen me drive and do the meetings. So I don't know if I could probably attend one at night, but I think we should at least wait for one meeting. That'd be my vote. But.
Okay, maybe try to do one in September when things have settled down or not, one way or the other. Keep it in mind. Okay, thank you, Mr. Madden. Bringing those issues up. Is there anyone else, a member of the public, who wants to briefly comment or ask a specific question at this point, realizing this is just the introductory meeting?
Hi, my name's Paula Fawcett, 16 Mansfield Ave. For some reason, I'm under admin. My computer was registered that way.
That's okay.
So my concern is how many residents will actually be living if the apartments are full, please?
And that's usually a feature of the number of bedrooms, correct, applicant?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. Some people might use a 2-bedroom and make it an office, but I mean, if you want to say, I don't have the number in front of me how many bedrooms we have, but I would say, what, 200 people?
I think it was 157 bedrooms.
So, yeah, that sounds about right. 157 bedrooms. So 157 bedrooms. Yeah.
Well,
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, my question is regarding traffic. I do go in and out of the Great Woods Marketplace, and I've been in and out of the nursing home across the street with family. And so it is a little bit busy getting in and out of there. And so what I was looking at, and I hope I heard correctly, is that at peak hours, you're looking at about 35 trips in the morning and 45 trips in the other peak hours at between 4 and 5. And if you have that many residents, it seems low, the amount of trips that have been presented.
That's during the one peak hour, though, whatever that is.
Right. But still, there's a lot of folks. If there's 179 parking spaces and people are going to work, you're going to have quite a bit of traffic coming in out of there. And so my concern is also when people are home, they do go in and out. Not everybody works, but it's one of those things that people do make a lot of trips during the day. So my concern is traffic. There's the auto parts, there's the nursing home, there's the apartments, and the Great Woods Marketplace. And on top of that, if the Great Woods opens up again, there's quite a bit of traffic there. So I would hope that the planning board or zoning would really check the traffic reports and maybe do a traffic report in addition to the applicants. Really look at that, that issue. And I actually am at 16 Mansfield, and I have a really hard time getting out of my yard at several times during the day. So it may affect it negatively. So those are my questions, mainly about traffic.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you for letting me speak.
Oh, well, thank you for participating.
Sure.
That's what the meeting is for. So it sounds like traffic is going to be an issue. We said a moment ago we're going to let the applicant address it a little more shouldn't say more thoroughly, but maybe expand its scope a bit and take these into consideration. And at the next meeting, maybe we can make a decision on a traffic peer review as well. Although these firms that we're talking to, keep in mind perhaps they should have a traffic component capability.
Can do that. We could include that. That's not uncommon.
Right, I mean, that's what I remember as well.
Yeah.
Some of the firms can handle not only civil engineering, but also traffic.
Right.
So as we're looking at firms, maybe Paul and Judy, we should keep that in mind, even at the outset, okay?
Yep, no problem.
Thank you. And is there anybody else from the public who wishes to ask a question or comment? Mr. Wiggins? You have to unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Peter.
And also, traffic from the TPC Boston Run Golf Tournament, it can get busy when there's golf tournaments, and come August when they want the Northern Trust Open, it's going to be busy, even though PGA won't allow any fans, but I wish I could go.
Yeah, understood. The PGA, the TPC tournament just down the road, or the TPC itself just down the road, is another concern. And maybe not this summer, but most summers, it's a real jam there during certain days around Labor Day. So that's within our concern as well. Thank you, Mr. Wiggins, for that comment. And Mr. Wiggins, I know, lives just down the road to the, I think it's the south of you. So he has experience there and works in the plaza as well. Okay, is there anything else that we can tackle tonight? Either members or Judy or Mr. Freeman?
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else from the public who wishes to either ask a question or make a brief comment? For the record, none at this time. But again, at other meetings, we do like to open it up to people because that helps our process as well, hearing what neighbors, abutters, and just general townspeople are concerned about. But again, this project has the blessing of the Board of Select Persons, and it's, I can tell you, looking at the plans preliminarily, it's pretty well presented and organized. So hopefully we can make progress here fairly quickly, one way or the other. Then it comes down to a board vote as to whether we approve the 40B project as it exists at the time, along with the list of waivers that we will be discussing. So again, board members, look at the list of waivers in particular, because those are specific things that we're being asked to waive, that the town would otherwise hold an applicant to. But 40B processes funnels a lot of things through us. So we've got to kind of think broadly as we go forward over the next couple months. Judy, what else can we do, if anything, or have we covered the opening appropriately?
I think you've done very well tonight. You've heard the presentation, you've asked questions. I think it's fine. If you want to go ahead and decide on a continuance date and, authorize Amy and me and Paul to find the appropriate consultants for you, I think that's great.
I think we've done that already, unless we have to vote on that, yes. And other than that, to continue it, I assume to August 19th. Is that date okay, Mr. Freeman?
Yes, it works for me, and team, you can check your calendar. Hopefully that's okay.
Okay. And Mr. Thornton, you're going to try to get back to us with some further guidance or information, whatever you can do. If you can't, you can tell us that as well, of course.
Yep, absolutely.
Paul, anything else that you can think of to tackle right now? We've asked you and Judy and town council to find peer review and get a quote for us.
Yeah, we can initiate that quick.
Ooh, that's a mistake, asking Paul to talk. You got. Yeah, your internet's not good right now, Paul, but thank you. I think I heard an affirmative response there. I'll go with it.
I'll follow up with Paul tomorrow. It's fine.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Judy. Appreciate everybody being here and following through. Is there a motion to continue this hearing, to our next meeting, which is August 19th at, say, 7:05 p.m.?
I can make that motion. I thought we had one 7:05.
We'll make it 7:10.
Yeah, make it 7:10. And then the hopefully we'll
Hop on.
actually 7:05. You're correct. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
So the motion is to continue this to 7:10 or August 19?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Tomorrow second.
Okay, thank you. Before we vote on that, and Council or Judy, what is the outside timeline that we are under? We've opened the hearing tonight. That was timely in relation to the filing of the application. Just very quickly, what's the overview of our time limitations? Unless we get agreement from the applicant, of course.
I checked 180 days tonight, and what I came up with was January 21st, 2021. I don't know if Attorney Freeman, I'm sure you probably checked the same thing, whether you agree, but that's what I came up with.
It's 180 days, and that certainly sounds right, but it can't be that high sometimes.
And if we can do it sooner, we do, and if we need more time, we ask the applicant for additional time. It's all a function of what we come up with over the next couple of meetings.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not advocating for it. I just want you to know what that window is.
No, that's what I asked, exactly. It's 180 days from tonight that we're supposed to have a decision, one way or the other. That's the timeline we're operating under. Okay, so is there any further discussion on the motion to continue? I'll ask for a roll call vote. Mr. Tenore, how do you vote to continue?
Yes.
Mr. Lynn?
Yes.
And I vote to continue as well. Point of order, I'm not sure if Mr. Booley, as the alternate, votes on these procedural things. I'll ask for his vote as a matter of record. Alan, how do you vote?
Yes.
I could clarify that with counsel going forward.
Is he sitting on this case?
That's what I want to clarify with counsel. I think we all sit on the case actually until there's a disqualification of one, although only 3 vote in the end, because we're a 3-person board, but I'll clarify with counsel off.
Okay.
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 Okay, with that, we're continuing. Thank you everybody for taking part and for a good start to this. We've got the plans, the books, except for one more set that sits on my front porch. Alan, you can get them at 4 a.m. tomorrow morning.
I've got this set, I need the next one.
Yeah, okay. Oh, you've got this set already, okay. This matter is continued till August 19th, thank you. We'll continue with the meeting in just a moment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye.
So next on the agenda is general business. Do we have any bills to pay? Nope, I don't think so. Paul is frozen again, but I don't think there are any. I haven't been presented with any.
We don't. It's Nicole and I'm not frozen. So I can tell you we don't have any.
It's the voice of Nicole.
It is. You'll never know where I live.
We know where you live, we'll just never see where you live.
Yeah, that's true.
I offered to buy Nicole a camera, but she refused, saying she is better appearing just now by voice. So
No, just voice.
we'll go with that. Minutes. I know we have the minutes from our July 8th meeting that were presented. Do the members have those for review and motion to approve or to change something? They're fine with me. This is the minutes of the July 8th meeting, which was the meeting with Ms. Barrett, Judy Barrett, our consultant.
Mr. Chairman, I have no comments. No comment.
Okay, so is there, Jim, did you have a comment? Is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I have a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? No, I'm sorry, I gotta do it this way. Mr. Rennie, do you approve?
I approve.
Mr. Tenori, how do you vote?
I approve.
Mr. Noel votes I approve as well. Okay, the July 8 minutes will be signed and forwarded. Were there other minutes? I confess I didn't look back to see if there were other minutes ready from a prior meeting. Nicole?
Let me just look and see what's in there.
Well, you know, I haven't seen them, so I guess I shouldn't even ask. Maybe we should just regroup and say at the next meeting, we might have to do a catch-up. Is that okay?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, because I didn't look for them, and I haven't, I can't tell you, but obviously I don't have them in front of me, so it'd be, rather than taking time now to read them over during the meeting, let's regroup, try to do that off meeting, and then try to take up whatever's outstanding for minutes at the next meeting, which is a week from tonight. July 22, we have the other 40B development. We'll open the meeting on that next Wednesday night, right, Paul? That's a thumbs up, and that means for the record, that's a yes. Okay, is there anything else to come before the board tonight? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
That's a good motion, Dave. Is there a second?
And on a second.
I have to ask for a roll call. Mr. Rain, how do you vote?
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. John, do you vote absolutely yes?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. The meeting is adjourned at 8:53. It's been a long day, but this was a good meeting. Thank you all very much. See you all next week.